we're going to move now into a panel discussion. And I'd like to invite our three panelists to go ahead and fire up their cameras and microphones. We have Greg Chavers, Joel Kearns, and Walt Engelund. And as we had, and I want to also thank our NASA leadership for taking time out of what I know is their insane calendar schedules to come be with us today. And as they previewed for us, our panel is now going to discuss the NASA Federated Board. And so what I'm going to ask is that we go around each of our three panelists. I'm going to ask them to each take about 90 seconds or so to kind of introduce yourself. And as you do that, please tell us, what is the Federated Board? And then what we'll do is I've got about 4 questions lined up that I'll pose and that you can each address in turn. So why don't we go ahead and start with Greg? Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, can you hear me? All right. So yeah, I'm Greg Chavers, and I'm filling in for Marshall Smith today. I'm actually his deputy, and he had a conflict and wasn't able to be here. Sends his regards. So thank you for having us. So I'm the deputy, as I said, to Marshall Smith, who is the deputy associate administrator for HEO, SE&I, and Marshall is the representative on the Federated Board. So that's what we have, and I guess we'll let Walt and Joel introduce, and then we'll talk about what the Federated Board is.
I have a mute button somewhere. Okay, very good. Joel, why don't you go next, please?
Hey, good morning. I'm Joel Kearns. I'm a Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration in NASA Science Mission Directorate. I joined SMD in early February this year, so I'm the newest member on the Federated Board. And my purview is the integration and strategy for science related to human exploration. As you can imagine, the big focus right now on that is on the moon with Artemis, and we're doing that for our human discovery and exploration program in SMD. A big component of that being the commercial lunar payload services landings coming up, which are not just for SMD, but are also for human exploration operations and space technology. So I'll turn it over to Walt.
Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Walt Engelund. I'm the Deputy Associate Administrator for Programs in the Space Technology Mission Directorate. And as I think you heard Jim Ryder talk about just prior to this, we've got a portfolio of 11 technology development programs in our Mission Directorate that span the range of low TRL, nascent technologies and concepts, all the way up to technology demonstration missions that support both human and robotic exploration. And, integrating across those programs and making sure they're aligned with the strategies in SMD and in HEOMD is really what the Federated Board is all about. So I think that's the discussion we're teed up to have here, and likewise with my counterparts in SMD and HEOMD. So we're looking forward to the questions and the dialogue.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And so let's go ahead, though, and have one of you just give us the quick definition. What is the Fed Board? Who all is on it? Who chairs? And so forth. Just to get that nuts and bolts thing out of the way. Thanks.
Well, probably
Go ahead, Walt.
Okay, I'll say as probably the veteran amongst us here, I'll give you my perspective. The Federated Board was stood up about 2 years ago, really as an integrating function across the mission directorates. And I think, like you've heard all morning, it is a way to ensure that we're talking amongst ourselves and integrating across the directorates for both human and robotic exploration, lunar and other. It's worked, I'll say, really well. It's been a sort of a clearinghouse for things at all mission directorate areas. I think we meet weekly. There's an extended or expanded Federated Board, which you probably also heard mentioned earlier from Sandra, and that's really the mechanism by which we use to communicate up into the A-suite. Steve Jerzik at the administrator level, some of the critical, strategic, and even tactical things that need real-time attention. So, Greg, why don't you take it?
Okay. Yeah. So in the membership, as I mentioned, Marshall Smith is the rep, and I'm his backup as the rep on the Federated Board, and then Joel and Walt, and there are a few other key key participants that we have on the board from each of the directorates as we work. But the topics that come up relate from our overall architecture to capabilities development, manifest planning, our partnership strategies that you heard Kathy talk about earlier, and even strategic communication that we have that would come out from NASA and so forth. So there's a broad range of topics that we discuss, and the key goal is to just stay integrated across the directorates, not surprising each other as we make decisions even at lower levels. So it's as Walt said, I think it's working very well. We meet at least weekly, even more often if needed, and have hot topics that we discuss and bring up and keep us the directorates informed about what each other's doing.
All right, thanks, guys. That's a really good summary, and it's a good lead into the first question I'm going to ask you to address. As we heard in our opening presentations today, there's a lot. We're talking about working across directorates, across the mission directorates, and this can't be simple. So please tell us, what are the biggest challenges in working across these three mission directorates?
Well, this is Joel. I would, first off, I'll tell you, I think the Federated board integrating activity is working really well. And it takes a lot of effort to stay connected. Even though we have regular times we meet, to stay connected, mostly because I think the span of activities in each of the three mission directorates is so broad, related to this area. If you think about the things that the workshop has already heard about today from several of the presentations, there's just a lot going on in each domain. So I think, I have to ask Walt and Greg what they think, but I'd say the biggest challenge is making sure that you're keeping each other informed of all these multitude of things that are going on, not just what the plans are and who's working on what, but any changes that could pop in or look likely in the future, because this is a big integrated activity, and a change in one pocket could really influence how people need to plan to do something else.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of what was a big challenge this last year, and I think has resulted in a nice success story coming out of the Federated board too, and I hope it will continue. And that has to do with the CLIPS program. SMD is managing this new commercial lunar payload services, and they're planning to fly 2 missions a year, and developing a manifest and the payloads across the mission directorates to populate the CLIPS missions, not just the first couple, but I think we're out to 2024 or 2025, and making sure those payloads and the delivery schedules and the integration across the various CLIPS missions is aligned with and communicated amongst us all, so there are no surprises. Yeah, I think that's been a really valuable use of the Federated board. And I'll just say, I think we've got a very similar opportunity now that the HLS path has been decided, or at least the initial decision. I think there's probably some architectural opportunities that may open up, maybe a few close, but I think from a technology development perspective and STMD's perspective, making sure we stay closely aligned with HEO and the evolving architecture that results from that, and being able to deliver the technologies, with the capabilities that they need is really our challenge. And I think the Federated board is the right structure to make sure that is achievable.
All right, good deal. I want to follow up on that a little bit. Sometimes it's a good problem to have so many things to keep track of, but clearly there really are a lot of things. Could you maybe give us maybe one recent example, something that happened in the past 3 months where it was particularly busy, but you managed to get it done? Because I know you've been telling us how it's working really well. So if you could give us just one short example of that success, that would be, because that's going to lead into another question I have for you later. And this one's, I'm making it up as I go, so sorry about that.
So Walt just mentioned one success with CLIPS. Another one is just our our Artemis manifest campaign for the human missions in particular, coordinating that with the board, what Artemis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and and understanding that that this is a campaign of missions. There's not just one mission, and so that's another challenge to understand what we're going to manifest and what we're going to do on each mission, as we want each one to build upon the other to get us to our long-term capability. So that's a recent one that we just discussed, was our manifest.
All right, thanks, Greg. And let's use that as we'll turn that coin over now. And you've just talked a little bit about what has been going on in the recent past. Tell us a little bit about what the coming, say, 12 months looks like in the world of the Federated Board. What's coming down the pike? This is going to slide into what I guess will probably be our last couple of questions to wrap us up. So thanks very much.
Yeah, I would just say again, you heard Jim just before this talk about the I'll just say portfolio of opportunities that we have. A lot of those are competed opportunities with universities and industry, and we rely on SMD and HEO folks, our friends in the mission directorates, to help us craft those solicitations, and more importantly, to help us evaluate the proposals and ensure we're selecting a portfolio, again, that is aligned with their needs, both from a technology pull and even from a technology push. So I think we've got a number of solicitations coming up in the next year, and I'm quite certain we're going to spend some time in the Federated Board talking about when those will occur and what we need from SMD and HEOMD to help make selections.
This is Joel. I'd add that we're in SMD, we're coming to the conclusion of getting ready to make the selections for the first payloads and research investigations for the surface of the moon, or PRISM suites of instruments for future CLIPS deliveries that'll be in 2023 and 2024, which also means that we're going to be coordinating, as Walt brought up before, other things besides science instruments that come out of that call for those delivery missions. And we're already working on getting information out to the science community about what the next PRISM call will be after that. But in parallel with that, we're all working on planning the science activities based on the Artemis Science Definition Team report that will be planned to be conducted for the first Artemis crewed surface missions. That not only includes astronaut activities, say for field geology on the surface of the moon, but also investigations and instruments in other areas that will take place on those Artemis crewed missions. So it's a real busy year coming up.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Okay. You've told us about you're doing well in this thing, and by being so far ahead of schedule here, we've go breeze through the questions that I've compiled for you. I got one and a half left for you. So this demonstrates how well these gentlemen work well together. Let's look at this, getting through all the program. But tell us what I know you've talked about this coming year. Tell us, what does success look like for the Federated Board? How do you view we've done our job well as the board, and how can this community who's here listening today help the Federated Board be successful?
Okay, so my perspective on that, what success looks like, and we alluded to it earlier, is one is not surprising the other mission directorates based on decisions that are made even at lower levels. And we do, and through our budget process, we don't know exactly what our budget will be next year, but we'll have to make adjustments if it's not exactly what we planned. And even if it is, we may have to make adjustments. And so success is just continually staying integrated and keeping each other informed, so that because we are dependent on each other, as Kathy mentioned earlier. And so making sure that we don't, as I said earlier, surprise each other, and that our plans are integrated and we stay integrated. So that's my thoughts for that.
And Greg, I'm just going to poke at you one more time here. What kind of input or activities in the community outside the agency would make the Federated Board's life better?
Okay. So one is as Kathy said, we've got some hard problems to solve, even long term. And so thinking about that, trying to help us solve those problems and approaches to how we can accomplish the goals for sustainable lunar activities is one thing. Another is just realizing that it's a campaign of missions. It's not, we can't do it all on the first mission. Our plans are too big for that. So it's going to take several missions. So realizing that we can't have every technology or every science experiment on the first mission is another way that would help us plan out and understand what planning we need to do for that whole campaign.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Joel, what do you have to say about that?
I would say for a community like this, it's really important to stay engaged. Speaking from a science point of view, I would say be proactive, provide advice through the advisory committees, submit good, solid, outstanding research proposals, the competitive solicitations that come out. That's what keeps, that's what provides the highest value, right, across helps all the mission directorates plan together. I'd also say that what's important is that, as I think Greg and Walt said, we're trying to stay transparent and integrated and aligned, so that we continue to be efficient with whatever resources the taxpayers make available to us. So I think the more engagement you can have through the formal methods that have been set up, for advice or in effect proposing the best stuff you can propose at any time is really just helpful to us overall to have the best things to stay aligned on. I'd also point out that as we move into this new era of having at least 2 delivery missions a year through CLIPS coming up in the future, that there'll be a relatively rapid cadence to be able to get things to the surface of the moon, which means that there's going to be more opportunities for technologists, scientists, people planning operations to try things out on these lunar delivery missions. And that can might make you think about how could you take advantage of that in terms of proposing things for these opportunities that'll come up to gather solid information quicker than maybe you thought about doing it before.
Yeah, and I would just add, we spend a lot of our time in the Federated Board talking about future mission architectures, not just lunar, but looking all the way out to what it is going to take to get humans to Mars and the technologies that we can develop and demonstrate on the moon that will help us do that. I think Joel mentioned the advisory boards, the MEPAGs and lunar advisory boards. We don't really have a technology advisory panel, but we're looking at something like the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium as a mechanism to get the technologists and the community to feed us, ideas that we can then evaluate and use to create new architectures. And I think the Federated Board is a clearinghouse to evaluate those, making sure we're integrated across the mission directorates. So, yeah, I think success to me, to all of us, probably is having an integrated architectural understanding of what the science and technology needs are to enable both human and robotic exploration.
All right, thank you, Walt. And I'm going to ask one last question here. We have about a minute left, so I'm going to aim this one at you, Joel, first, because you just mentioned something that I was thinking about, and that's the CLIPS program. And could you just talk a little bit about, I know we don't have a lot of time, but what's the sort of overall strategic plan for how the CLIPS missions are going to go? Because clearly they're going to go to different places and be doing different things. Is there a strategic plan right now, or are you guys working on that, or what's the big picture for that?
Well, what we do is we look at where to plan the landings or the CLIPS deliveries will go based on the advice we've gotten from the community in the past. The root advice, right, is the decadal surveys, particularly in planetary science, but also when you think about doing science on the moon as opposed to science of the moon, it could also be from decadal surveys, and I'm talking scientific investigations there from other disciplines besides planetary science. And then based on more near-term advice from committees, whether it's roadmaps or special reports that the different advisory groups have put together, we have an overall plan going forward for what we expect the landing sites will be, or at least at what times we will pick what the landing sites will be. And then we match, and then what we do is we have this regular cadence of what I refer to as PRISM calls for future scientific instruments that are either for those specific landing locations or perhaps in the future kind of landing site agnostic locations. If you've read the Science Definition Team report for Artemis, how that is aligned to again those past community documents for advice, again going back to decadal surveys. So you should be able to see a progression of what's going to be done using CLIPS, using PRISM, and also using CLIPS for science and technology and exploration endeavors, and also see how that relates to the Science Definition Team report. And I think you're going to hear more about the SDD report for the Artemis crewed landing missions later in the workshop today.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. And I think we should probably cut it off there. We're just about a minute over our time. Not that I don't want to hear Greg and Walt talk again. But yes, and that's a great way to end because we will be hearing about the SDT report. We'll also be hearing some more about CLIPS and PRISM a little bit later on in our program today. So let me thank Greg and Joel and Walt for joining us today on an excellent panel discussion.